Hello, I'm Nick Qureshi. You're watching Sky News Tonight with a special programme as the government unveils its new policy for asylum seekers crossing the English Channel. The headlines: Destination Rwanda. The Prime Minister defends his multi-million-pound scheme to send asylum seekers 4,000 miles away.
These vile people smugglers are abusing the vulnerable and turning the channel into a watery graveyard.
Sky News takes a first look at where refugees will stay when they arrive in Rwanda. The Prime Minister puts the Navy in command of the English Channel, but will it deter people from attempting the crossing?
This doesn't make sense. They're welcoming all Ukrainian people, like they're humans, we're humans as well.
Hello, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Asylum seekers who attempt to reach UK shores illegally will be sent 4,000 miles away to Rwanda to be processed. The Prime Minister has put the Royal Navy in control of the English Channel and defended his new multi-million-pound policy as the right thing to do. But the new plan has received criticism from migration and human rights charities who say the measures are draconian and lacking in compassion. Coming up this hour, our panel will be answering your questions on the new policy. First, though, let's take a look at these new policies that have been announced by the Prime Minister. Anyone who entered the UK illegally from the 1st of January this year may now be flown 4,000 miles to Rwanda. From today, the Royal Navy has taken over operational command in the Channel from the Border Force, while Boris Johnson has said the £120 million deal with Rwanda is uncapped and the country has the capacity to resettle tens of thousands of people in the years ahead. Our first report tonight is from Sky's Lisa Holland, who's been examining the details of the government's asylum plan.
They waved to our cameras, delighted to be in UK waters. We tracked the same group to the beach in the Kent town of Lydd.
How's your journey today, sir? Do you speak?
The migrants know they will be met by the emergency services and medical help if it's needed. It is this process which the Prime Minister has vowed to break through deterrence, promising to send tens of thousands of male and female asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing or a new life.
We must first ensure that the only route to asylum in the UK is a safe and legal one, and that those who try to jump the queue or abuse our system will find no automatic path to settlement in our country.
Exactly as Boris Johnson was speaking in Dover, a baby was amongst the migrants brought ashore at the port. In future, the government wants to screen those arriving through an illegal route and via a safe country such as France.
I think we need to see these plans for what they are. It's a desperate announcement by a Prime Minister who just wants to distract from his own law-breaking. They're unworkable, they're extortionate, they're going to cost taxpayers billions of pounds.
With predictions there could soon be 1,000 migrants arriving by small boat a day, the Navy and the Army have now been drafted in. But the strategy to tackle the rising numbers is hugely controversial, still to get through the Commons and likely to be challenged legally.
I've seen nothing that provides any reassurance that people's human rights are going to be upheld. Parliament has been considering the government's legislation that would allow it to move forward with this plan for the past few months, and the House of Lords has put up huge opposition.
For those who remain in the UK, a former RAF base in North Yorkshire will be turned into a new reception centre. With more than 100,000 asylum seekers, there's an accommodation shortage. £5 million a day is being spent on hotel bills alone. The government says the system is broken. In Birmingham, we met Fida from Afghanistan, who's been waiting 2 years for his claim to be processed. He says even the asylum seekers themselves aren't happy.
Asylum system is too long for us. Long process. No give me money, no house, no clothes, no shoes. In the see my tent, no helping the daughter. Someone in the mentally problem.
The Prime Minister says his plan will save people from the greed and dangers of people smugglers. But the fact is, everything else to stop the Channel crossings has failed. Lisa Holland, Sky News.
Well, an initial £120 million is expected to be given to the Rwandan government under a trial scheme after the Home Secretary struck a deal during a visit to the capital, Kigali. In a joint news conference with the country's foreign minister to confirm the plans, Priti Patel said Rwanda had a history of resettling refugees in a skilled way. Sky's Shingi Mararike is travelling with the Home Secretary and has had a first glimpse of a new asylum centre in the country's capital. From there, he sent this report on Rwanda's refugee camps.
Over 4,000 miles away and on another continent. But here was the Home Secretary, arriving to unveil a plan that places Rwanda at the heart of our immigration policy. Her proposal? To punch a one-way ticket to East Africa for people who reach the UK illegally. An agreement she hopes will deter people from dangerous journeys like channel crossings. They'll stay in accommodation like this block. Here, the government says they'll have their asylum claims processed before taking steps to rebuild their lives, potentially in Rwanda.
This used to be a hostel, but it's already being prepared for the arrival of asylum seekers from the UK. There are 50 rooms in this block, including places to eat and sleep. But essentially, it's a holding centre where those people will wait for their asylum claims to be processed.
Priti Patel is confident that building and this country will be a safe space.
Australia have set up their own offshore processing system, and there are reports of self-harming and even people taking their own lives because these people are going through tremendously difficult times with their mental health and they've made difficult journeys. I wanted to just ask, how will you ensure the well-being of asylum seekers sent to Rwanda? Do you see that as a UK government's responsibility, or are you passing the buck?
Australia is not comparable. This is not the type of arrangement that Australia had. Australia, as a sovereign country, obviously had its own arrangement. It is fair to say our teams have been working through facilities here. You've heard me mention in my opening remarks as well the technical experience that we are bringing. We believe in investing in Rwanda. We're very open about that.
Rwanda's foreign minister feels they are ready to process thousands.
We assessed our capacity to receive migrants, and we know that we have a capacity in place to receive migrants.
To reach that point, though, they'll need to scale up and fast. Here, they're planning to build 2 more blocks. On top of that, politicians don't want to deal with a British backlog.
If our kids, or Rwanda's kids, has not the possibility to go at school because of the poverty, how Rwanda government will assume to give education to the kids of these refugees?
On the streets of Kigali, we found a sense of hospitality rather than hostility.
We can encourage all of the world to come to stay in Rwanda.
They may be called migrant or whatever, they are just people.
For many who make the perilous journey for a better life, places like this will now be the ultimate destination. But the debate around whether the decision is right has only just begun. Shingi Mararike, Sky News, Kigali.
And Shingi joins us live now from the Rwandan capital. Good to see you. So we saw this centre. The big question is, will Rwanda be able to cope with an influx of potentially tens of thousands eventually arriving?
Good evening. It's an interesting question, that, and we had the chance to go and see the sort of accommodation that asylum seekers will be staying in earlier on today, as we saw in that piece. And it's a perfectly reasonable space that. It's got room for 100 people, there's a communal dining area, there are places to sleep, and there will apparently be specialists on site to help the people make those adjustments. But what I found really interesting were the questions that the officials there could not answer. We spoke to them a bit about the development itself. It's meant to be a block one block in a set of 3. We asked when the other 2 blocks will be built. They couldn't tell us that. In fact, we then later found out that the Rwandan government hadn't even finished buying that block of accommodation from a private company. So there are lots of questions about what happens when British people get, or asylum seekers from Britain get here. And we also had the chance to watch Priti Patel unveil this plan alongside a Rwandan minister, and she talked through it at length quite bullishly, despite the fact there are other questions about the cost per head for each person coming here. We know that there's a £120 million price tag placed on this scheme, but we don't know about how much it will cost for each person, and we don't have a further breakdown on that front either. But despite all of those things, she was confident. She spoke to us after the press conference and told us that she wants thousands of people to come here, and not only that, but that she wants to expand the scheme to other countries. So even though it's a controversial policy, it's one that the government are doubling down on.
All right, Shingi, many thanks indeed. Well, the new plans have received criticism from migration and human rights charities, who say the measures are draconian and lacking in compassion, and that they won't work. They have been questioning why it's necessary to send asylum seekers thousands of miles away for processing. Well, Sky's Ashna Hurinag has been to Calais to find out whether the new measures will actually deter people from attempting the crossing. She sent this report on the people there seeking asylum.
Shafi's journey to Dunkirk started in Afghanistan. He fled as the Taliban moved in, and until a few weeks ago was in Ukraine. But war once again forced him out. This is now his temporary home.
As you can see, like, it's a rough situation in here. This is every day they bring the water in here. Here you take the bath. So as you can see, there are families, there are kids all over here.
They're waiting, like thousands before them, for a chance to take the final leap into new futures. But their dreams are being rewritten by the UK government. News that we broke to them.
If they take us to Africa, what are we going to do there? There is no future for us in Africa. We are from Afghanistan. I was trying to become a translator. So from there, when the Taliban took over the country, so our life was in danger.
With their determination unfaltered, their intentions remain. They'll keep trying to get across till they succeed.
We still have to go. Like, we can't stay in this country since we don't know anyone here. Everyone thinks about their future. So in England, everyone, they give proper rights to the human beings.
They wait weeks and months for opportunities like this. Last October, we watched around 80 people board inflatable dinghies in broad daylight. All of them made it across the channel.
For years, the UK and the French governments have been battling to stem the flow of asylum seekers arriving at camps like these. But this is a business, a form of organised crime, a network of people across the world preying on human misery and a desire to get to the UK.
The Home Office plans are said to be directed at young men like Shafi, but they say the timing is callous.
This doesn't make sense. They're welcoming all Ukrainian people. Like, they're humans, we're humans as well. There shouldn't be double standard in the world.
The war has been started since 20th century in Afghanistan, and they are suffering too much. And now in Ukraine, this is just started, and everyone is just thinking about Ukrainian people. This is not fair for us.
The European Commission has slammed the new policy as neither humane nor dignified. And for those a whisker away from new beginnings, this is no deterrent, just another hurdle to overcome. Ashna Hurinag, Sky News in Calais.
Well, let's take a closer look then at how this scheme is going to work. Priti Patel, the Home Secretary, has said that eligibility for the scheme will be based on inadmissibility to the asylum system, suggesting it will apply to people whose claims for asylum in the UK have already been rejected. All transfer requests by the UK will require approval by Rwanda before relocations, so Rwanda can effectively veto any cases at their discretion. Exact financial arrangements for the scheme haven't yet been set, though the Refugee Council has estimated the plans could cost £1.4 billion a year. And what is also unclear is whether the policy will only affect unaccompanied adult men or if families, women and children could also be eligible for deportation. Well, let's get the thoughts of our political correspondent, Rob Powell. One thing unclear there seems tonight to be plenty that isn't very clear, not least the cost of all this.
Yeah, exactly, because that £120 million that's been flaunted by the government today is actually just investment in Rwanda's economy as part of this partnership. It's not really anything to do with the practical elements of this scheme. You set out there that £1.5 billion was the figure put on it by the Refugee Council. We're told by the Home Office this evening that there's no further information about figures put on compensation for the scheme. We also don't really know, and I think this is what Shingi was getting at when he was questioning Priti Patel in Kigali, what the involvement of the UK and Rwandan authorities is going to be. We're told that the decision on the asylum claim in Rwanda is made by the Rwandan government because it relates to staying in Rwanda. These people won't be taken back to the UK if they're approved. This is about settling and building a life in Rwanda. But to what extent does the UK have oversight over what is going on in these accommodation units and how the service is being run? We don't really know who exactly will go. There was a lack of clarity this morning after some briefing that it would mainly be single men. We're now told it will be everyone, but not children and minors, and families won't be split up, which suggests mainly single men and single women. But of course, Rwanda can say no if they are worried about, say, criminal records. We don't know whether this is completely legally sound. Lawyers have been pointing out today that there may be legal challenges using the Refugee Convention, using the European Convention on Human Rights as well. Boris Johnson said as much in his speech that he expected there to be legal challenge as well. And I guess the big thing we don't know is whether it will work. This has been tried in a few countries before. It hasn't always worked when it's been tried there. In Australia, there was reports of people self-harming because of the conditions in there. But I think there's a political imperative for the government to do something. I think they think this will be popular in terms of it shows they're taking it seriously. But I guess the real measure of success will be how many people build lives in Rwanda successfully and whether it stops people making that perilous crossing across the channel.
Plenty of questions, though, tonight. Thanks a lot, Rob. Now, coming up later this hour, we're going to be joined by a panel of experts who'll be answering your questions on this new asylum plan. Do send your questions to us by email at news@sky.com, or you can tweet them to us at Sky News. Now, the latest on this asylum plan, bound to feature heavily in tomorrow's papers. We'll have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 this evening with tonight's news and tomorrow's headlines. Joining us will be Assistant Comment Editor of The Telegraph, Olivia Utley, and the Political Editor of Wales Online, Ruth Mosalski. You're watching Sky News tonight. Thank you for your company. Coming up, we'll be speaking to an immigration lawyer about the government's plans to send some asylum seekers thousands of miles away to Rwanda.
The plan is to take the political temperature midweek. So we'll be discussing the biggest stories of the week so far, talking about what's still to come, having a look at Prime Minister's questions, of course, and getting a reaction from politicians, plus our very own viewers. And we'll have analysis from my Sky News colleagues.
The Take with Sophie Rich on Sky News.
Russian soldiers, air raid sirens fill the airways.
In the distance, artillery rains down.
It feels very close to the centre of... There's one.
They found this devastation to their apartment.
Lots of people live here. Quite a few of the windows of the houses have been blown out by the blast.
And it feels that it's changing each day.
ba ma dalee commencé liggéey bi yokkute bu bari am nañ ko ci.
Let's get you more now on the government's plans for some asylum seekers crossing the English Channel to be flown around 4,000 miles away to Rwanda. The Prime Minister says the partnership will be fully compliant with international legal obligations and has insisted that Rwanda is globally recognised for its record of welcoming and integrating migrants, in his words. Well, joining us now is an immigration lawyer, Harjap Singh Bangal. Good to see you on Sky News tonight. Thank you for your time. I mean, when you first heard this, that plans to send them to East Africa, what did you think?
I just thought instantly, well, hold on, costs, unworkable, it's not moral. Is this the right thing to do? Elections looming. Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak in trouble at the moment, probably holding their worst ratings ever. And is this just something to take the pressure off them? That was my initial thoughts. And when I started looking at how it's going to work and the costings of it and the previous models it's going to be based on, like Australian system and what the Israelis did in Rwanda, then I sort of realized, well, hold on, the money being touted around is definitely not going to be enough. And this is going to cost the British public a lot of money for potentially what's going to end up as a disaster, like pretty much else the Home Office has been doing recently. Why would it be a disaster? Because if you look at the Home Office's record, first of all, on stuff like Windrush, look at it on how the Ukrainian scheme was started. What it does is it announces stuff, but it hasn't got the infrastructure to deal with this. So it's announced this. It's not going to announce how the staffing is going to work, how many people are going to be sent to this centre. I mean, the British public tonight are probably thinking 20,000 people a year are going to be sent to this centre. But Australia last year only managed to process 250 people offshore, and it cost them £460 million to do so. So 120 million isn't going to cut it for 500 people, isn't going to cut it for 1,000 people. And also the whole thing about Boris Johnson today saying, well, hold on, they won't be allowed back. They're expected to settle in Rwanda. Israel did a similar thing for 3 years and managed to send 3,000 people to Rwanda, out of which only 9 are there today and who are living in dire straits. The rest have been snapped up by the gangs and have been migrated elsewhere. And some of them might even be here. So the gangs are always a step ahead. It's almost as if the people are being punished as opposed to the gangs being punished. There's no announcement on providing lifetime sentences for gangs, how we're going to catch the gangs, or
Well, he has pledged, though, hasn't he, to give life terms to people traffickers. I want to go into the legal side of this now, but Boris Johnson has said that he does expect legal challenges. What avenues can people pursue when they hear this?
Yeah, of course, they can put in human rights claims, and if they're going to be sent to places where it's degrading for them, and if there's no proper facilities, if it's equivalent to torture, a lot of detention centres, and even one in the UK has been closed recently because it was inhumane and it was awful. The inspector who went round there said it was the conditions were terrible. No human could live there, so they had to close it down. If the conditions are going to be similar, then of course there's challenges in there. You can't say we're going to process asylum seekers and then have them worse off than from the places where they've come from. So that is going to be an issue and a challenge. Also, Boris Johnson's very cleverly covered himself because he might be realizing, well, hold on, what we're trying to do is essentially unlawful. And so therefore, I'll inform the public, well, hold on, there's going to be challenges to this. It's a bit like the equivalent of, say, a news corporation, let's say, tomorrow saying, we're going to sack everyone, but we expect to have some tribunal, hearings about it. Well, of course, because what you're doing essentially is breaking the law. So if you break the law, you're going to be challenged, and lawyers are there to make sure the law is pursued and is applied correctly to everybody. And recently we've seen how the government treats the law, and the government breaks its own laws. So yeah, I think
you don't know, but you don't know that people are going to be worse off now or then than they are now, do you? These assurances from Rwanda that these centres, or the one that we've seen today, will be safe, and it welcomes people.
Yeah, I mean, Rwanda is going to be getting paid for this. So obviously that's why they're doing it. Of course, they're going to say, yeah, send it over. They're going to be earning money out of this. But we don't know anything about the Rwandan conditions. The way they've dealt with the people sent from Israel hasn't been brilliant, because otherwise they would have stayed there and settled there. So we don't really know. And until, we're shown that it's safe, and until we're shown that it's proper, no one is going to believe it. And essentially the key is, Nick, where's the money for this going to be coming from? If we're going to say, right, we're going to build a detention centre with top quality standards and, it's going to be safe and everything, then what about the staffing? Who's going to pay them? Where's the money going to come from? I've already told you how much for 250 people, the Australians are paying 460 million. We're going to run into billions like this. Over the last 10 years, Australia spent £5 billion and have decided that it's better to use the pushback system for the boats rather than process people offshore, because they just haven't got the numbers.
All right, we'll have to. I'm afraid we'll have to leave it there. Time is against us, but I'm sure we'll talk to you much more about this in the coming days and weeks. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
OK, let's take a look at the weather for you, shall we?
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, it's turning warmer, but there'll be rain or showers at times, and a mostly fine evening, but rather foggy near some southwestern coasts, while Ireland, Northern Ireland and northern Scotland will be quite cloudy with patchy rain in the north and west. Most places will stay fine overnight, but Ireland and southern and western Britain will see low cloud and fog returning. Ireland can expect a little more rain too, but it will be mostly dry elsewhere. The UK will see sunny spells developing widely Friday morning, but exposed northeastern and southwestern coasts will stay rather grey. Elsewhere, inland parts of Ireland will see fog, low cloud and patchy drizzle giving way to brighter skies and a scattering of showers. Northern Ireland, though, staying quite dull.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good to see you on Sky News tonight. Coming up, we'll be hosting a special Q&A on the government's announcement that it plans to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda. Hello, welcome back. Asylum seekers who attempt to reach UK shores illegally will be sent 4,000 miles away to Rwanda to be processed. The Prime Minister has put the Royal Navy in control of the English Channel from today and defended his new multi-million-pound policy as the right thing to do. However, the new plan has received criticism from migration and human rights charities who say the measures are draconian and lacking in compassion. Well, you have been sending in your questions to our guest panel, and we will put those to our guest. Joining us is Dr. Noor Al-Haq Nassimi, a former refugee and founder of the charity Afghanistan and Central Asian Association, which helps refugees in London to integrate. We're also joined tonight by the Labour peer and former refugee Lord Dubbs. A very good evening to you both. Thank you for your time today. Let's crack on with these questions, shall we? Let's start with Manish, who thinks UK policy towards migrants has been hostile for many years, but so many people still attempt, he says, the treacherous crossing. He says the government does need to put up a very strong deterrent, but asks if this scheme is the solution, as it does seem quite expensive and, in his words, inhumane. Lord Dubbs, let's start with you. What's the answer? Is it correct?
No, of course it's not. It's a mistaken policy. It goes against the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees principles. It goes against the 1951 Geneva Convention. It sends people away to a distant country with no assurance that they'll have legal support or any of the rights that they ought to have in a civilized country. So I don't accept what the government is saying, nor do I believe that Rwanda has a good human rights record. That's also being questioned. So I think it's a mistaken policy, and I don't believe the government has any authority to do it. I don't think they've got any legislation to do it. The Nationality and Borders Bill is still going through Parliament. There's an amendment to do with offshoring, and that's gone back from the Lords to the Commons, so we haven't even finished yet.
Dr. Nassimi, expensive and inhumane, this scheme?
I think we need to find a form of words that addresses the universal concerns for this plan. We have to remember there was a recent history, there was a serious genocide in Rwanda, and Rwanda has a very poor track record on human rights. I completely agree with your honorable guest that this is a serious mistake, and I think that the government should provide a proper maybe debate in the House of Parliament, as well as asking the British people and the public to see what is the views of the British people, what the British people are telling us, whether we should continue, we should go ahead with this plan or not.
Let's move on to a question from David now, who asks how a democratic government can even contemplate such a scheme. He asks, how will the plan affect the reputation of the UK on the international stage? And does it not involve breaches of human rights, Lord Dubbs?
Well, I agree with what the questioner is saying. Yes, I think our normally good tradition of respect for human rights over many years has really been trashed by this government. They've been doing it for some time now, but it's got even worse. This is a terrible decision. It's a decision which says we don't want people in this country. We want to get rid of them, whatever their rights should be. And I don't think we're going to be regarded other than very badly by the international community for having neglected our responsibilities and neglected our traditions.
OK. Dr. Nassimi, how will the UK be regarded on the international stage, then?
We have to understand that UK historically is the most democratic society in the world and the most hospitable society in the world. But on the other hand, taking such a decision, it seems irrational according to the views of the many people. I was watching the news today and I was reading also the views of the British people published in different newspapers, and most of the British people, they say this is a wrong decision. I do understand the aim of the Prime Minister, which discourage the traffickers to smuggle people and put their life in dangerous, and also encourage to find the safe way, the way that how people they can travel in a proper way to the United Kingdom. But on the other hand, as I said, that Rwanda ruled by a dictator, and we have many refugees who claim for asylum from Rwanda in the United Kingdom.
We'll stay with you, Dr. Nassimi. Here's a question from Peter, who says, if the government is prepared to fly these illegal immigrants to Rwanda for resettlement, why don't they just fly them back to their country of origin? I mean, that might happen anyway if Rwanda doesn't approve them. Dr. Nassimi?
Oh, sorry, I wasn't...
OK, basically, this questioner asks, Peter says, why don't they just fly them back to their country of origin if the government is prepared to fly these illegal immigrants to Rwanda for resettlement? Why not just send them back in the first place? Rwanda might do that anyway.
I think we have a Dublin Convention which said that anyone who claims for asylum in the United Kingdom, their human rights should be respected, and the authorities do not have the right to deport them back to a country where they come from. For example, the people from Afghanistan who are coming to the United Kingdom, everyone knows that they are not economic migrants. They are coming from Afghanistan to the United Kingdom because of persecution. They escaped the war, they escaped the Taliban, and the Taliban, as you know, that their human rights record also is very bad. And that's why I think that we need to also consider the Dublin Convention to see that whether the Dublin Convention allowing the United Kingdom to deport people back to their own countries or not.
Let me go to Lord Dubbs, but we are running out of time on this section. So let me ask you one more question, Lord Dubbs. You can come back on this. John thinks this is a really good plan, but says it should also include those migrants who arrived illegally last year. He asks, some lawyers will try to challenge this scheme. So how can the government prevent them from slowing it down or even stopping it altogether? We know, don't we, that this scheme at the moment will affect people, or should affect people, who've come to this country from January the 1st onwards this year. Lord Dubbs.
There's one, you're using a word which doesn't apply. You're saying illegal. Human beings fleeing for safety are not illegal if they cross a frontier. They're not illegal if they're seeking to get safety. And we shouldn't be calling them illegal. What's happening is that they are not travelling by routes which the government wants them to follow. But the government has made it almost impossible to follow what they call legal routes. Anybody wanting safety flees across the frontier to get to find where there's no persecution, and to get out of Ukraine, to get out of Afghanistan, to get out of Syria, you've got to flee across another frontier. And the government are simply finding a way of saying, we don't want you here at all. It's not right. It's against human traditions. It's against the Geneva Convention. It's quite wrong. And the word illegal should not be used about human beings in that way.
Is that your understanding, Dr. Nassimi, in just an answer, if you would, on this specific question? What is an illegal crossing?
So, according to the refugee situation, when you look at in the history, normally the people who are leaving persecution or leaving their countries to find a safe place, most of them, they travel without passport, without any documentation, because they can't apply for a visa and they can't get a visa. How they can consider as a illegal migrants? Of course, this is the only way people they can find a safe place for themselves and for their family members, is to take us a long journey, a very painful journey, and eventually arrive in a country where they can feel safe and better. I disagree with the term used, illegal migrants.
All right, well, thank you very much indeed, gentlemen, for now. We'll be back to you in a few minutes. In the meantime, you're watching Sky News Tonight with a special Q&A on the government's asylum plan. In a few minutes, we will be asking, how will the Navy enforce this policy and certainly try to make sure that no boats make it to the UK?
I'm Inzamam Rashid and I'm Sky's North of England correspondent, telling stories from this culturally rich region I call home.
We take you to the heart of the stories that shape our world. If there is a bigger explosion, this area would be in the danger zone.
These traffic jams snake for hours up and down this hillside.
We know that 800,000 people have been displaced.
Hong Kong is not China! I think experiencing the 2 million person march in Hong Kong, that was a moment.
Police have been firing tear gas and rubber bullets.
You see fires all around us here.
Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Bangkok.
I'm Whitehead and I'm Sky News' West of England correspondent. From fishing communities to bustling cities, we spend every day reporting from across the region.
Hello, welcome back. You're watching Sky News Tonight with a special Q&A on the government's new immigration plan. Joining us again is Dr. Noor Al-Haq Nassimi, a former refugee and founder of the charity Afghanistan and Central Asian Association, which helps refugees in London to integrate. We're also joined by the Labour peer and former refugee Lord Dubbs, and also in this section, Kevin Saunders, the former Chief Immigration Officer for UK Border Force in Calais, who was present at Boris Johnson's speech today. Welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us. So some more questions then. Let's start with Shah, who's looking at the financial implications of the new scheme. She asks, is it more cost effective for the UK to send illegal migrants to Rwanda than keep them in the country? And why is Britain a destination people head for rather than anywhere else? Let's bring in our former Border Force official. Thank you for joining us. Let me put that to you, because you were there today, but nothing came out about the cost, did it? £120 million going to Rwanda, but this is specifically for the economy. Nobody has a clue how much this scheme will cost.
No, all we know is what it's costing at the moment. And it's costing us £5 million a day. That's every day, 7 days a week, to accommodate these people in hotels in the UK. So, that's a lot of money. I have heard a figure of 120 million for setup costs. Whether that's true or not, I don't know.
That, Lord Dubs, that 120 million figure is going straight to the Rwandan economy. So, really, are you concerned about the cost? No, but this is an open book, isn't it?
Well, of course, I'm concerned about the cost because it is taxpayers' money and it is not being used for good purposes. I mean, there was one Conservative MP who said yesterday, I think, that it would be cheaper to keep people at the Ritz than to send them to Rwanda. Now, that may have been a political rhetoric, but the fact is that we don't know enough about the scheme as a whole. We've had this thrust at us. The Home Secretary has not explained in detail how it's going to work, has not explained in detail what happens if somebody is refused refugee status in Rwanda. What happens? Are they flown back, or what have you? And the other question that was asked is why the attraction of the UK? Look, I believe we should share responsibility for refugees across Europe. We can't take them all. We should take our share. That is my only plea. And why some of them want to come to the UK is quite often family reasons. I've talked to Afghan boys who fled the Taliban before the borders were closed. They've made their way to Calais and they want to join family members in Britain. What is more sensible and humane than that we should agree that if an Afghan boy wants to join a family member in his country, that he should be able to do so? That's simple, it's straightforward, it's humane.
Let me put that to Dr. Nassimi briefly. All about compassion, isn't it, as Lord Dubs is suggesting there, and family reasons?
Yes, of course. As I said that in my previous conversation, the reason people they choose Britain because of its democratic values, because of its hospitality, because of the opportunities available in the United Kingdom. But on the other hand, I was thinking when my colleague was talking about this 120 million pound that the government will spend, I was thinking why the United Kingdom do not set up, they do not spend this money to set up an immigration center in the United Kingdom to keep them here rather than sending these people to Rwanda without their wishes, without their will, or without their expectation. Because I don't think that the people who put their life in risk to come to the United Kingdom where then will be sending to Rwanda.
All right, let's move on. A question from a viewer who would like to remain anonymous at the moment. They ask, operational control of the English Channel has been handed to the Royal Navy right now. How will they enforce this and make sure no boats make it to the UK? A question for you then, Kevin Saunders.
Yeah. First of all, I am extremely glad that the Royal Navy have taken over control of the Channel. They're going to bring command and control to the situation. They're going to be deploying drones. They're going to be deploying aircraft, helicopters, all of which is going to assist in looking down onto the Channel to see what's happening down there, where it's where people are trying to get on boats, and obviously we can let the French know so they can do something about it. And if they are coming across the Channel, then we can intercept them. But what we're doing, the idea of this legislation, what the Prime Minister said this morning, was we want to deter these people from coming across the Channel. I know that there will be an objection if I call them illegal immigrants, but I want to call them that to distinguish between them and the other migrants that are coming to the UK, like Ukrainians, Hong Kong Chinese, and Afghans. We've got to remember that we have taken 185,000 people through our various schemes into the UK. What we're trying to do is to stop the illegal arrival of these people. We're saying to them, if you come illegally, If you don't come properly, then we are not going to deal with you. Now, there is nobody forcing them into these boats. They are getting into the boats for their own free will. And I would pose this question to you. Would you pay a smuggler £10,000 or £20,000 or whatever it is to get into a boat to know that when you reach the UK, you're going to be put on a plane to Rwanda? And the answer to that is no, you wouldn't. And this is what we hope will happen. And we hope that these people won't make these dangerous crossings and will claim asylum in one of the many European countries which are perfectly safe, which they've travelled through.
Let's move on because we haven't got a lot of time. Here's another question. Jan says the plan seems to be very confused and it isn't clear where illegal migrants, in Jan's words, will end up once they have been processed in Rwanda. She asks, does it mean they can't apply for asylum in the UK once they have gone to Rwanda? If so, does that break international law? Lord Dubbs, let me put that to you. These are our viewers. People putting questions describe them as illegal immigrants or illegal migrants. And that is the thrust of it. I appreciate you say you have difficulty with the word illegal, but people are posing these kind of questions.
The trouble is, if there are no legal paths to safety, then people in desperation will go any way they possibly can. And what this government has done is to close legal routes to safety. If I take the case of children who are stuck in Calais, want to join their families here, there used to be a method when we were in the EU under the Dublin Treaty, whereby a child in one EU country could apply to join relatives in another. So a Syrian boy in Calais could apply to join an uncle in, say, Birmingham. Well, that's all been closed down by the government. So if there are no legal routes to safety, they have to find whatever way they do. And I just don't believe this. I don't believe this will work. And I think it is wrong in principle. I think we're on the wrong side of where we should be. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, they don't like this. The Geneva Convention talks about people being able to claim asylum wherever they can, and I don't think we're on the right path here at all. What's more, I doubt whether the Home Secretary has the legal powers to do it. The legislation hasn't gone through yet. It hasn't been debated in Parliament. We have to have a proper democratic process for debating it to see what it actually adds up to. We don't know yet.
OK, a couple of final thoughts. Dr Nassimi, we are running out of time. Do you think this scheme will get off the ground?
You see, we have many large countries within the European communities. And the question is why the other European countries, which my colleagues say that which are very safe and having much better than Rwanda, why they don't accept these refugees in the first instance? For example, in Norway, in Sweden, in Germany, and in France. I think that maybe the United Kingdom, they should put more pressure on other European countries, including on France, of not complying with the UK agreement. That there was number of important agreement made between the United Kingdom and the French authorities for the past maybe 15 years. But the French authorities, I think they're not very transparent in complying with those agreements.
OK, let me come in there. I apologise. We have running out of time. Very quickly, one word, Kevin Saunders. Will this scheme get off the ground?
Yes.
Lord Dubbs,
it will.
You don't think it'll happen?
The government will try and make it happen, but I don't think it's going to work, no. OK,
gentlemen, I do appreciate all your time tonight. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sky News tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Right,
OK.
Easter coming up. Let's have a look at the weather.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
And just in time for the bank holiday, it is turning warmer, but there will be rain or showers at times. A mostly fine evening, but it will be